Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the BGVP Melody. So normally I don't spend too much time on the boxes and all the accessories, but this one is probably the best part of this set, so we'll spend a little more time than usual. So BGVP Melody, these shells, super nice. I'm kind of really impressed with the build quality, the shape, the design. These are removable nozzles, so you can actually pull this guy off, and they give you a set of 3, which we will show in a minute. But yeah, super nice, actually super nice shells. They feel really great. Nice metal build, nice design. Cable's pretty good. The box, again, pretty nice box. It's got lots of stuff in it. Pretty cool box. Inside the box, you will find this other case. And in the case, you'll get a set of bass tips, which I'm not sure why you would need more bass, but they give you bass tips. These are vocal tips, which maybe give you more mids, which would have been a good idea. So vocal tips. They give you some memory foam tips, kind of nice. And these are the tuning nozzles. So there you go. You get a hi-fi, balanced, and pop. So we'll look at those in 1 second. So overall, very nice accessories, very nice shell, nice build. All this stuff looks very nice. So sadly, I would probably, I would trade all of that for better tuning. Give me 2 shells in a plastic bag, and I would probably be happier if the tuning was better. So looking at the graph, you can kind of see these are the 3 tips all graphed, and in isolation on its own, you kind of look at it and you're like, okay, well, it's kind of a bassy, fun set, and that's probably true. So you can't really tell too much about the graph. Everything actually looks kind of reasonable. You definitely I couldn't rule it out just by looking at the graph. I thought the graph actually looked okay. This was kind of iffy how that would all work out, but generally looking at the graph, I think it actually looked okay. And this one really came down to listening to it. So let's kind of dive into it. So the good, it's definitely okay. It doesn't offend. It's got really no fatigue points to it, nothing sharp, nothing shouty. And it's definitely another 12 millimeter dynamic driver, which is pretty cool. You don't see too many of them. The not so good, no part of this set sounds like $120. And obviously I didn't pay $120. I paid about $30. Sounds about $30. The shell build is definitely $30, but the rest of it, no, it's definitely not $120. The mids are frustratingly recessed, dull, and unengaging. And you can sort of say, well, you can almost see that in the graph, but I think the graph looks better than it actually sounds in my ear. So shell is definitely nicer than the sound. I think the whole package, all that stuff, as I said, I would trade all of that in a second for better sound quality. Stage is also smallish for the price. It's kind of way too small to be $120. Not an experience. This is kind of a bare bones stage that's just big enough to sound okay. The sound, it's kind of a mild V. It looks like a bigger V on the graph, but I think the bass kind of dominates, so it doesn't really come across as a bigger V. And it's got that mid-bass center. A lot of the sound is kind of right here in that grounded in that mid-bass. And to really pull that off, you need a lower treble, an upper mid. You need something that's stronger to cut through all of this, and they never quite get there. Everything sounds a little muffled and dull. And I think it was the right idea, and I think the graph is sort of the general right shape of it, but not so much. The bass, it's definitely a bassy sound, and this is the star of this set. If you like decent bass, 12 millimeter bass, it's kind of okay for that. Definitely thicker, fuller bass instead of impactful. And I think that's where some of these 12 millimeter sets go wrong. I think you really need sharp definition, really nice impact to really pull off why should you buy a 12 millimeter dynamic driver. Just being thick and full, you can get that on 10 millimeters. If you just want to fill the stage with thick, full sounding bass, you can pretty much do that on a 10 millimeter. To do 12 millimeters, it should be, tactile and impactful. It should go a little beyond what you would get from a 10 millimeter, and this one doesn't quite get there. It's a good control, okay level. It definitely has more mid bass than rumble. It doesn't really extend all that deep, and it's actually likable. But I don't think this one again was a showcase for a 12 millimeter dynamic driver. It's okay. It's really hard to put a finger on something that where this 12 millimeter sounds better than any other 10 millimeter. So the mids at a high level, they sound okay. They're just way recessed, veiled. I just couldn't raise the volume enough to hear them clearly, and that's where the frustration bit was. You can turn this one up until your ears are bleeding, and the mids just don't quite get there, and it's really hard to figure out. And I'm not going to sit there and go through EQ and try to figure out what the problem is. It's not worth it at $120, but yeah, I just kept on raising the volume, like the mids have to fall into place at some point, and they never do. And then I just kind of gave up. I had no interest in figuring out what was wrong with this set. Sounds like a recording of a recording with a lack of clarity and detail and resolution. None of those things even come close to $120. And the stage being a little small, and it really multiplies that lack of clarity. Everything is kind of scrunched into a smaller space, overlapping and layer, and all these things just kind of didn't work with a smaller space. Treble, definitely forgiving levels. It's kind of nice on older recordings, but it's really lacking enough level to really balance against the bass and provide clarity to the mids and expand the stage. I will say the treble is there. You can kind of hear it on good tracks, but I don't think that one was quite balanced enough to really pull off the whole sound signature. The treble on its own may be okay, but the overall sound signature definitely needs to be reworked. And stage, like I said, it's way too small for the price. You really need a much better to pull off this signature, a bassy sound like that, even going back to the Blonde BL03. You really need a big stage to really open it up so everything isn't so congested and lacking detail and imaging. All those things get really affected on a smaller stage without enough treble to really open it up. And this is just a classic example of it. And sadly, it costs you $120 to figure that out. But yeah. So there you go. That's what I got on Melody. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.